Hello there ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first ever video version of the WorldBuilder tip of the week for Kotu.org. This is MonolithicBacon, and rather than giving you a tip this week, I'll be going more in the vein of giving a display of all the different assets that have been released with the Western Front Armies. Now, if you're half as nerdy as me, as soon as you saw that an expansion pack was coming out, you probably thought, this is going to be new stuff to play with. Not in terms of armies, but all the different things that are being released as assets, buildings, trees, bushes, and so much more creativity. Now, Relic really have taken a completely different step with this release. Whereas before they focused more on things like the British and Panzer Elite teams when they released opposing fronts, and campaigns when they did Tales of Valor. In this one you can tell that they're focused more on giving the entire visual scene a completely different look. So, one of the biggest things that hopefully you'll notice when I go through this are how different some of the additional assets are. The main one are buildings. So, while we had some of these similar style buildings, these Dutch buildings before, which are tall and thin, they've really given them a proper texture revamp. So we have old stone, we have plaster and paint versions of them, and they all come with their own intricacies and details. They really are just fantastic additions to urban mapping. Now this got me really excited, and hopefully you'll see that whenever you look through some of my different maps. This one is a release that's just come out called Citard, and it is almost entirely urban, which is something that I really wanted to focus on. So, within this map I've showcased as much as I possibly can, but the idea with these new buildings in particular, I wanted to try and show off how they can be used. If you look where the mouse is here, you'll see an example of a very unique situation that doesn't happen very often in Company of Heroes, where you're going through an entirely built up area where nobody can really fire upon you. This corridor between the two buildings here is completely unguarded. It's open, granted, there's very little cover, but infantry can easily exploit units within the buildings next to them. Additionally, it also provides a lot of cover for vehicles that are trying to escape from harsh situations. Now, this is something that I really do adore. They've done so well, especially with little additions that they didn't have to add, like this tiny little building on the end here, which is just bloody adorable, considering it's a building. Now, one of the other things that really stood out, particularly in the trailers, were trees. If you were like me, when you first saw the trailer, you thought it's going to be in the Ardennes forest. We're talking huge, great big green pine trees. Really good stuff to work with. And although this map has very few of these trees, there's a little tiny one here, they've added some other things. They've not just focused around pine forests, they've actually overhauled their oak trees as well. So, if you have a look over here, we've got a very small oak and then different sizes leading up to the biggest one. I really have to say I'm impressed with these. They are fantastic additions. Very detailed, with great colour schemes, really do liven up your maps. But the issue is that because they're so big and so wide, they don't tend to fit in too many places unless you're doing a really rural map. But the idea with this, I hope, is that it will push us away from the black, white, grey, brown styles of the Eastern Front maps and more towards the brighter colours of the Western Front that you saw throughout France, the Netherlands, into Belgium. One of the main concerns here though is the bushes. Green bushes have changed. So if you're looking at the thinner bush rows that you used before, the light green ones have now been completely replaced by dark green. The orange autumn ones are still there, and the winter versions are still there too, but these summer ones have been replaced. If you are concerned about that, do go through your maps, have a look and see if they work. I was surprised. I think they blend in quite well, whereas before I wasn't too happy with them. But with extra things like grasses and trees, and even their new little ferns that they've added, the amount of details in there to really blend them in is spot on. It's all we really need. And now the ability to make really fleshed out rural areas looks fantastic and is so easy to do. The other thing that's onto that are the new brambles. So red or purpley reddish, even azure brambles and shrubs have been added, as well as grasses, just to add a completely different colour to the scheme. This is something that we've never really had before. The idea of seeing red was completely absent from the previous game. So hopefully, using some of these assets, you can all give a little bit more diversity to it. I certainly am going to be trying myself to just give some completely new styles of maps. Now, this little piece here in this corner is something that I've really wanted to show off. Right where I'm pointing is one of the brand new trees, and even though the previous one was small, this is still pretty small too. The Ardennes pine trees get massive. They are fantastic assets to work with, and they really do give the idea of a huge inescapable forest. They're great to work with, which I hope you'll try. Other than that, we've got the idea of this stone building, which has got some fantastic detail on it. Really nice, different designer buildings, which will hopefully give a clear indication of an environment different to eastern rural maps, and point you more towards the western side. Because there's nothing worse, I imagine, than creating a map for the Western Front Armies and it's still looking like it's taking place in the middle of Russia. So, other than this, we've got, I'd say, a major concern, which I should just highlight here. It's nothing too bad, but when it comes down to mapping, this is something that is going to affect all the previous maps that you have made, which may cause some problems. These blue discs are the new HQ areas for the Western Front Armies. Every team has to have a disc like this. The design of it is based around the American HQ, which is a defensive ring. Even if you think that you've got enough room in your map for one of these discs, do check it first. These discs are huge. If I get a 32-meter grid up, you'll see that on average these discs take up around 64 meters a piece if you want to have room around them for vehicles to maneuver. So go over your old maps and see if your new HQ areas are going to be big enough for the American forces to play. If they're not, something's going to have to change, and I know that some of my old maps definitely need to be edited. But it should be noted that the actual size of the US bases is not the size of this blue ring. They're actually smaller than the blue ring. But if under any circumstances the supply boxes on the outside of the US bases are out of the playable area, if I just get the soft map edge up, if they are outside of this line, you cannot use the boxes. So say you upgrade your HQ with bazookas, and the bazooka box is outside the map area, you cannot pick them up at all. They are completely unusable. The HQ is still there, and it can still be destroyed, but that box can't be used at all, and it will really, really mess with the gameplay of your maps. So check them before you play them, because some of them may need to be updated to the workshop. Other than that, there's not too many other concerns. Most of it is good. We've got new additions like support walls, which are a nice colour palette. They really flesh out the areas, and a nice welcome change from some of the old assets, which are still being recycled from the first Company of Heroes game. As well as that, we've got new tiles and textures which you can use, so some cobblestones, and over here we've got different styles as well. These have been used in a lot of the release maps as well, so you'll see them quite a lot, but again, the colour scheme there is absolutely spot on for bringing some more life to maps, to really change the concept of them. Other than this, one last point that I definitely wanted to make out before I jump onto another map to show some other stuff are vehicles. We have completely new civilian vehicles that you can use. The old ones aren't gone, you can still use those as well. In fact, all the old assets are still as they used to be, apart from bushes. The only other concern that I might really point out are wrecked vehicles. Now, when I was working on the team with the Alpha, we found that there are so many wrecked vehicles now that only a few of them work, and you have to be careful which ones you use. So as a word of warning, if you're going to have wrecks in your maps, make sure that you pick the right ones, or test them first. Other than that, you may also notice that the OKW have an ability to scavenge vehicles now, like the Wehrmacht used to in Company of Heroes 1. Be careful of this. For balance reasons, if a team has wrecked vehicles right outside their base and they can scavenge from them, they will have a massive advantage over other teams. So if you're going to have wrecked vehicles, try and keep them towards the centre, just for gameplay reasons. So, that's it for me on Citard. I'm just going to jump over to another map of mine, Bois-Jacques, and I will see you there to show off some more of the trees. Hello, and welcome back. So this is Bois-Jacques. This is one of the other release maps that I've managed to get out, which was created during the alpha. This is completely different to Citard, and although I won't be showing off too much of it, I really wanted to make it clear that the trees that they've added are awesome. All these gigantic pine trees look fantastic in game. They are so detailed by comparison with summer and winter versions, and the scope for what you can do with them now is absolutely stupendous. There is going to be a great flurry in new style maps, and hopefully forest maps will make a comeback, because rural maps seem to always take precedence over anything else. So, not really much to say technically. We have large groves and small groves, and there are about 9, no, even more than that, probably around 20 different versions of, including summer and winter, of these pine trees, from very, very small to very, very large. It's well worth checking to see which ones are indestructible, which ones can't be flattened with tanks, but a lot of them can be. And mixed in with things like bramble and the new grass types, you've got some absolutely spectacular assets to use to create proper countryside and rural maps. One of the other things that I also wanted to show you, which caught my eye, if I could jump into the object selector here, these rocks are something that I've been waiting for a long, long time. They're indestructible, so far as I'm aware, and they are just simply cover bases for the rocks. So if you've ever placed some of the larger pieces of stone in the maps before, these small pieces will give you green cover if anyone walks up against them. Such a simple little thing, but all of a sudden we have scope for more cliffs and mountains, quarries, ravines, so on and so forth. Rocks are a real environment that can be used now, a real asset, and it's going to be great to test them out properly. So, as for the rest of it, hopefully you'll go out and explore yourself. I'll be back next week with a proper tip of the week, showing off possibly staircases. But until then, keep mapping, enjoy yourselves, and I'll see you soon.